Hello my beautiful bookish friends and welcome back to my channel. Today I am standing in front of my bookcase because I finally have it in a way that looks nice and that I want you guys to see with all my little decorations up. But today I am talking about my top books of 2020. I don't have a set number of them every year, like I don't try and break it down to 10 or 20. It just depends on what strikes me and what I rate 5 stars. So this year I have 12 books. I have my little notebook over here, so I'm going to keep looking to the side. But I'm going to talk about these books. So I am going to get started with book number 1. These are just ranked in whatever order I read them. So number 1 is Tiger and Dilly by Jodi, Lynn Anderson. This is a dark retelling of Peter Pan, all from the perspective of Tiger Lily in the Native American camp. This book was really dark, really not disturbing, but I would say hard-hitting and much more heavy and emotionally charged than any other retelling that I've read. This one just focuses on so much of the culture and colonization, and it's a very different look at Neverland and kind of paints Peter Pan in a darker light and not so light, and it's definitely not the Disney version of the story. So all of these are 5 out of 5 stars, by the way, so I'm not going to talk about them too much because I've talked about them before. But yeah, this is number 1. The next book is Gay Life Chloe Brown. If you are on BookTube or you watch maybe 1 or 2 BookTube videos of people who read adult contemporary, then you probably heard about this book. This is all about Chloe Brown, who has a near-death experience and ends up reevaluating her life, all while dealing with her chronic illness. And she goes on a whirlwind romance with her building's super, and they try and live out her best life as best she can, but it also talks a lot about the struggles of her dealing with her condition. I believe it's fibromyalgia is what she has. So a lot of it is pain and a lot of it is just trying to get through life without being a burden. And it also talks about her sisters who are going to be in a spin-off series. So I'm very excited to read that. But this is one of my favorite romances ever, and I will definitely reread it. The next book is Sky in the Deep by Adrienne Young. I read this book in about a day and a half. It is so good. It threw me into a Viking world that I never knew that I needed in my life. The romance in this book is super good, and it is all about a girl named Elin who is raised to be a warrior, and her brother has died in war, or so she thinks. And in thinking that she sees her brother, she ends up getting captured by an enemy tribe, and she is sent to go live with them and be their prisoner, all while dealing with the fact that her brother very well may be part of these people now that she is sworn to hate. So there's a really good romance in this story, but it's also more about survival and trying to live up to expectations, and also family and brothers and sisters and friendships. And there's a lot of really good fight scenes in here. Usually I'm not a gory kind of person, like I don't like to read about gore, but it is done very well in this book, and it is not too gross, but also not too light that seems unrealistic. The next book is a YA thriller. This is The Vanishing Stair from Maureen Johnson. This is book 2 in the Truly Devious series, which I would say hands down is one of my favorite series of all time. This second book was so good. I mean, the first book sets up the world and the case that we're dealing with, and this one continues on with that, but also throws you right into a kind of political scandal almost happening in present day, and there's murders going on in present day that directly coincide with the killings from the 1920s at the academy. So it's very good, and it answers a lot of questions, but also giving you a ton more going into the third book, The Hand on the Wall, which wasn't one of my favorites and was almost kind of a letdown compared to this one. But this one is so good. Stevie's character really blossoms in this one. We find out more about her, more about what makes her special, and more about the students at the academy and what makes them special and how they can all help in solving the case. The next book is Love Her or Lose Her. This is the second book in the Fix Her Up series. There's a name for it, but I can never remember the name of the series. If you watched my wrap up of this book, you know that this book absolutely tore my soul apart from page 1. I love this book. This is all about Dominic and Rosie, who are a couple who have been in love since high school. Dominic was in the military and now has really bad PTSD, and Rosie has become very reserved and quiet around him and feels like she can't tell him anything, can't tell him about her hopes and dreams, and they really can't move forward in their marriage because he won't talk to her about anything. So she leaves him and they end up going to marriage counseling to try and fix their relationship. This book is so good. It's way more emotional than Fix Her Up and is definitely more focused on I don't want to call it like a hate to love, because it's like a love to resentment to love. I feel like it's a very real look at how some marriages can go if you don't communicate. And this is just one of my absolute favorite romances. I will probably reread this and annotate it because I read it in a day and I'm sure I missed some little nuances here and there that I really should pick up on. So yeah, this is one of my favorites, and I just love the world that it's set in. Fix Her Up sets it up, but this one dives much deeper into that world, and then of course Tools of Engagement dives even deeper, but this is my favorite one out of the whole series. So by now you can probably tell that I love contemporary, and especially this year most of my favorites are contemporaries. But my next book I want to talk about is Well Met. This is the romance set at the Renaissance Fair between Emily and Simon, who is kind of a grumpy, he's just kind of difficult to deal with kind of guy running the Renaissance Fair, and Emily is someone who kind of gets roped in just to help out her niece. So this was a hate to love romance as well. It is so good. I love the idea of the Renaissance Fair, the characters, the costumes. I've never been to one, but I would really like to go to one at some point. And it's just something that I'm kind of interested in anyway, like costuming, playing, dress up, and all of that. If you've been on my channel, you know this. But the romance in the story was really good. Again, there was a really deep family aspect that played into the romance and kind of explained why everyone was the way they were. So I really like this book, and I know it got a lot of hype, and I will say that it lived up to it. This book was a pick from Book of the Month, and this is Happy and You Know It. This book didn't get very much hype, I feel like, until after a few people had gotten it in their Book of the Month like sponsorship boxes, and then they actually read it and I found out this is a really good book. This is a domestic thriller that centers around Claire, who is a entertainer for a baby play group of rich moms in New York. And through her babysitting the kids and hanging out with the moms, she finds out that these moms are in a little bit of trouble and could use her help. So it goes very much from like this girl struggling, just trying to get through life, who makes these friendships that are very unlikely, to this full-blown domestic thriller, especially within the last 150 pages. And it is so good. The intro of the book kind of sets it all up, but you really don't know when you're gonna get to that making sense in here until probably about 30 pages from the end. So it's super good. It keeps you in suspense, and you almost forget about that intro because of so much that happens in between. And when you get to the end, you're like, oh yes, I was told this already. So very good book, and it definitely deserved way more hype. Next we have a YA mystery, and that is Escaping from Houdini. I think all of Kerri Maniscalco's books have been on my favorites list every year. I love the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, and this is the third installment. This has Audrey Rose and Thomas Cresswell and her uncle all traveling to America on a ship. But while they are on the ship, there are murders happening that represent different tarot cards, and one that doesn't. And you will learn why that's important if you read this book. So it's just more about her following her career as a forensic scientist and trying to solve a mystery. Harry Houdini is written into this story. And these are definitely historical fictions, even though some of the things in the book are close to true. Sometimes the timeline's a little off, or there's not proof that these certain things happen, but there is speculation. So it is very good, and there is a carnival on the ship, so it very much read like a mystery and a little bit of Caraval, which you all probably know if you've been here for more than 3 booktube videos, is my favorite book ever. So I love this series. I will reread it at some point, but I very much liked this one in particular. I have a book that I hesitate to call YA just because the subject matter is so heavy, but I think it's very important that young adults read about this stuff because it is happening in real life, and that is The Female of the Species. It's all about a girl named Alex whose sister is murdered and sexually assaulted, and the guy basically gets away with it because of some loophole, and she now is very, very angry and very violent because of the situation, understandably. But it talks about her trying to function through high school, living in the shadow of her dead sister, all while trying to lead a normal life, have friends, have a boyfriend, and none of that really goes the way you expect it to. There's a lot of twists and turns in this book that I can't say without completely spoiling it, but I will say this is a very tragic, heart-wrenching story. I read the whole book in like 6 hours. It is a very quick read. It's so fast-paced. You just want to know what's going to happen next, and is it all going to be okay in the end? So I would go in very cautiously. There's definitely trigger warnings in here for sexual assault and drugs and drinking and that kind of stuff, but it's very good and very much worth the read if you can handle it and it's not going to hurt you mentally in any way. And the next book is a YA fantasy, and it is Finale, which is the third and final book in the Caraval series. I love the way that Stephanie Garber wrapped up this series. There is no Caraval game in this one, but it definitely feels like there is, or there's some sort of game going on. We have a lot of carryover from Legendary, so if you haven't read that yet, you definitely need to read it before you read this one. I mean, the timeline is right into it from page 1. There is so much going on in this with Donatella and Scarlet and the Fates. Again, you have to read the second one to know what I'm talking about. But this was so much better, I think, than any of them. Actually, the series is amazing as a whole, but this was just the perfect wrap-up to it all. And I don't think there needs to be any more books. I heard there's going to be one more, and I really hope that it's a little bit of a spin-off so that it's not drawing the series out too much or creating more questions than answers within the world. The book I read actually wasn't a physical read. It was on my phone through the Kindle app, and that is The Deal. This book is a new adult romance all set at a college, and it has hockey players and romance, and it's basically the plot of every fan fiction that was ever written about a frat boy. So it was very good. I liked it. I read it in a day, I think, and just because it felt very nostalgic and very Wattpad-y. But it was also had a lot of deep, like, family stuff about abusive parents and privilege and, you know, not everything being as it seems. So it was super good, and I want to continue the other 2 books that are the spin-offs of the first one. My final favorite of 2020 is Capturing the Devil. This is the last book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. Again, a perfect ending to an amazing story. The first part of the book, because this one is broken down into 2 parts, all takes place in New York and talks about Thomas Cresswell and Audrey Rose and if they're going to get married, and basically kind of gives us the wrap up to the romance that we want. And then you go to Chicago, where we start dealing with H.H. Holmes, and there's a lot of crossover between him and Jack the Ripper, and it brings in a lot of conspiracy theories or theories about what happened to Jack the Ripper. Was he really ever caught? Did he get arrested for something else? Did he just die? Did he come to America and kill people here? And then it talks about, of course, the murder hotel. Again, this is historical fiction, so the timelines aren't perfect. But it was truly an amazing, amazing, amazing story and a perfect end to the series. So those are my favorite books of 2020. There are a dozen of them, so a nice even number, which is super nice. If you guys want to see me talk more in depth about each of these books, I will leave my booktube playlist down below, and in each one of my wrap-ups I talk about these books and my TBRs, so you guys can check them out there. If you like these kinds of videos, make sure you stick around because I'm going to have more of my end of 2020 booktube stuff coming, and that's it for me. So I hope you guys like this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.